Dysregulated emotions today could mean that anxiety, depression, or worse is in their future. Here's what you need to know. Emotional dysregulation isn't just a phase. It's something that some kids, some individuals, including adults, struggle with all the time. And what we're going to talk about is that long term, when you struggle with regulating emotions through life's big things, but often through life's little things, it can lead to some very serious consequences, not just for today, but in the future. But don't worry, because I'm Dr. Rowe, and that means we're going to talk about practical solutions actually all month. We're going to be talking about different ways to support your child and your own nervous system so you can avoid some of these. Before we do that, let's get real here because I don't want coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? I hear that all the time and I feel so bad. It's usually a mom who says, oh my gosh, the signs were there and I just didn't put it together, right? You know, Steve Jobs tells us that we can only connect the dots looking backwards, and it's true. But I want to help to connect those dots for you right now so that we don't have coulda, woulda, shoulda, and we have happy kids and happy families. It is absolutely possible, and don't let anybody tell you anything different. So let's talk about some of these long-term impacts because emotional dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation left untreated can and will have a negative impact, right? There could be academic impact in terms of, you know, not just learning, but social impact. There can be health and physical, and certainly mental impact. We know that individuals with low stress tolerance have a lot more clinical issues, right? So anxiety, depression, OCD, much higher risk for things like substance abuse and other at-risk behaviors because everything dysregulates them, right? And you know, this is 2025. Every day is fraught with hurdles, right? And so we can be a glass half empty or we can be a glass half full. And even if you are a glass half empty or your child is wired that way, guess what? You can unlearn that and you can become a glass half full. I promise you can. There's no magic wand. These things take time, right? So absolutely a higher risk for mental health issues when you are prone to emotional dysregulation. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to have anxiety, depression, OCD, because guess what? You're going to take action on it. And that's what these conversations are all about, right? So kids with emotional dysregulation, you know, they are also prone to academic issues. Why? They often get misdiagnosed as ADHD or other issues. And really, it's because when your nervous is in a chronic activation or a stress state, how can you pay attention, right? How can you focus? How can you complete tasks? How can you learn? And it leads to gaps in learning. And guess what? More importantly, gaps in confidence. If you don't have confidence, doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter what street you live on, what school your kids are going to, how amazing you are. When confidence is missing, you just can't achieve at the same level, right? Now, I know nothing about sports, but I admire athletes in so many ways because they know there's the physical part of athletics, but there is equally on the other side the mental part, right? So that internal dialogue, what you tell yourself, is very, very critical for any area of learning, right? Not just academics, but also in sports, right? So we know that kids with dysregulation don't learn as easily, and it also affects that learning at home, right? Why can't my kid, do simple tasks at home or chores? Because if you're activated, what do you want to do when you're really activated? Maybe this conversation is activating you. You want to avoid, right? And so avoidance can look like low motivation. It can look like disrespect. It can look like you have a raging case of ADHD. Really, you could be struggling in the inside with a lot of internal dialogue. You also could be feeling a lot of physical components of dysregulation, right? Racing heartbeats, sensory sensitivity, irritation. And these are very real things that affect kids as much as adults, right? I always think about that emotionally dysregulated adult that right? I have somebody in my family member to, mentally prepare myself to interact with this person because they dysregulate, right? Everybody's got somebody like this in your family, right? I try to do cool things like bring my PMF to parties and stuff. And I'm like, here, you need a little PEMF to chill out. Not alcohol, but it's pretty cool. So there can be a real social impact, right? So kids that dysregulate more frequently than their peers, they are more prone to actually being bullied. They also can be the bully, right? Because they are trying to control things, right? They are also more likely to be socially isolated and have trouble maintaining friendships. When you have a kid who dysregulates, hello, I'm a mom of a Pan's kid. And when he was little, he would like dysregulate like crazy on the bus stop. And it didn't really make for a lot of friendships, right? For him or me, right? And that's okay in many ways. You need a few good friends as kids, and the kids need friendships because then that's how they learn, not just for today, the future. There's always an impact on family dynamics, right? So I think one of the hardest part is when you have a kid who has a low threshold, right, for reactivity in terms of just anything, like things not going your way, new things, anticipatory anxiety, conflicts of any kinds, just any, discomfort is what I like to call it. There's often a parent-child disconnect, and I think for most of my parents, that's one of the hardest, saddest things because it's such a fuel for that internal dialogue that, I always talk about getting on the worry train. It drives our worry train because we're like, "What's going on? If I can't connect with him, how can he connect?" Right? Well, we have a lot of things that we bring to the table. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, sometimes we're not regulating. These are all things that can be addressed. A lot of times what's behind it is frustration, misunderstanding, exhaustion, and a whole lot of friction. And that family dynamics isn't just you as a parent, there's also can be a real sibling conflict, which I don't think I talk enough about because it happens and it's very, very real. Siblings are prone to conflict. I'm married to an only, and sometimes he'll be like, "Why does your sister do that? Or why does your brother do that?" He just doesn't get it because he doesn't have a sibling. And I'm like, it's just sibling stuff. But you can have conflict at a much higher rate, right? I always talk about the WWE SmackDown. Like you have more than one kid, you didn't know you can be like a referee. And that really can happen normal sibling stuff, right? But when you have a dysregulated kid and your family ecosystem is working to not set off the dysregulated kid, the walking on eggshell syndrome, it really can change your whole dynamics because you're like, oh, don't do that because, Fred's going to get really irritated and we can't have that. Right. And it can create a lot of resentment, it can create resentment between the kids. It can create resentment and conflict between you and your spouse over how you're managing this. Your mother-in-law or father-in-law can have lots to say about it, or your own parents. I find this is just what happens a lot, right? There's always an impact of emotional dysregulation. And it is truly one of the things, right, that parents will say to me, like, why shouldn't I? Why didn't I do something earlier? Right. And if you are somebody who's really looking for help, about our solution matcher, it maps you to the right solution to where you're at. And you're just going to go to drroseann.com/help. We have some really cool solutions. Everything from free solutions to $9 and up and one-on-one working with me. There's all kinds of things, and that will guide you to where you're at. But I'm going to really dive into ways, as always, how can we regulate the nervous system effectively, naturally, without medication? And so we're going to be talking much more about neurofeedback because you have so many questions. I actually took all the questions that you have, and their upcoming episodes are going to be on that. We're going to be talking about my Calm PEMF and PEMF in general. We're going to talk about magnesium. We're actually going to talk about L-threonate, one of the only forms, it's the most studied form of magnesium that crosses the blood-brain barrier. And what does that mean? Direct injection into the brain, essentially. And that's good stuff. And then we're going to talk about parent techniques. So as we dive into all of these things, yeah, you got an emotionally dysregulated kid. Again, I don't want to hear coulda, woulda, shoulda. These are signs. It's like your child's behavior is a red flag, of course, but it's also your alert system to actually implement things. And regulating the nervous system is always part of my multi-pronged approach. There is no shortcut. And if you're like me, 50% of kids in America have a physical or a mental health issue. This is just the state of America. So we have to embrace these wired uniquely individuals, but we have to regulate the nervous system. Without calming the nervous system, no learning's going to happen. Your child's attention isn't going to regulate. Their health isn't going to improve because that is biology. It's not going to allow that to happen. It's called psychoimmunology. And instead of getting caught in a reactivity cycle, what we need to do is we need to address this early, right? So if you have a kid where it's happening a lot, right? There's some level of dysregulation. I talk about under or overstimulated behaviors. It's been, it's constant, keeps coming up. You're whack-a-mole in it and it's not getting better. You got yourselves a problem. These episodes occur for a significant period of time, right? Not just over months, but actually whatever episode. So it's emotional dysregulation or they're zoning out. And that's happening for, beyond what's normal, what's developmental, right? If you're unsure because you don't have multiple kids, right? There's lots of information here about that. So if it's occurring at a high frequency, high intensity, and there's poor recovery, you got yourself a problem. And so we're going to talk about science-backed solutions because the science shows us that we need to get to root causes, which is nervous system regulation. And guess what? Medication is not the answer and it should never be the first line of defense. And we're going to talk more about that. I hope this is inspiring you to take this year. This will be a new year if you're listening or watching, and really, really say, okay, whatever I've been doing hasn't worked. It doesn't mean that I can't find a way to help my kid. Don't get hung up on that. I don't want to hear that because that's what pharma wants us to believe. So you can get hooked on a medication that's really not going to get you anywhere. Got to regulate, got to teach new skills. And we're going to talk more about that in the upcoming episodes. So if you need more support from me and you're just like, Dr. Rowe, let's get started. First of all, it's my love language. I'm a get shit done kind of girl, freak people out. So, and you can move at your own pace, people. Just because I'm like lightning doesn't mean you have to be, but you gotta put one foot in front of the other and you can't just wish. You can't just hope. You can't just pray. I'm Christian. I believe that we all need faith, whatever faith you have, lean in. Okay. But whoever you pray to, they don't want you to just pray. They want you to pray and then take action. Okay. So you can go to drroseann.com/help. That's my solution matcher. Get started today. And I hope this is going to be the best year ever for your kid and your family. And it starts by going to drroseann.com/help.